وفائك لون السحاب وحسن الربيع.
A message that comes to say, Salams, Hamas treated the hostages with respect. What our beautiful religion of Islam teaches us. Now, alhamdulillah, it's absolute chalk and cheese the way Hamas has treated their prisoners or their hostages, and the way our prisoners have been treated on the other side. 16 days of activism aims to raise awareness about gender-based violence, challenge societal norms and attitudes that perpetuate violence, and mobilize people around the world to take action to end violence against women and children. We have online with us Professor Mary DeHaas, a retired academic and prominent violence researcher. Professor DeHaas, good morning to you, and thank you for joining me on the program this morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Professor, how prevalent is gender-based violence in our society today, and what forms does it commonly take?
Look, it's very prevalent. I don't think we can quantify it because, women, I've come across a lot of women who try to cover it up. Mm-hmm. They don't want to admit it's happening. It happens behind closed doors at homes. But it is very prevalent. I mean, we've only got to see reported cases, and it takes many forms. It takes abuse of partners, of course, often serious abuse. It takes, obviously, crimes of rape. Rape, even of children, is most alarming. Again, it's difficult to quantify it. We have the statistics with the police, but not if all rapes get reported to the police. And that perhaps is the most serious of all because it can ruin a woman's life. And what is particularly serious is what seems to be a growing rate of rape of children, girl children, probably boy children, but I know of cases where girl children are raped and they're young kids. I mean, what does this do to people? What does this do? Even adult women, a rape can be a trauma for life. Mm-hmm. It can affect the whole trajectory of your life. It can be something that you just are never going to be able to forget. And, it has a really deep impact on women. That's the most serious of all, I think, apart from murder. And, of course, we see so many murders of partners. So it's a very serious problem. And, I mean, of course, kids get abused at home in other ways, too. So it's very, very worrying.
No, undoubtedly, this is quite serious. But when we speak of gender-based violence, and I know that this is a period of 16 days, against to end violence against women and children. But recently, I've read of matters where even men are become the victims of gender-based violence. Now, how prevalent is the gender-based violence against men?
Look, it does happen. It's absolutely true. I mean, I was a marriage and family therapist years ago, and I remember the odd case of men getting abused by their wives. But it does happen. Look, there's another issue here when you talk about abuse. There's also the form of emotional abuse, mm-hmm. which can be very damaging. And women often emotionally abuse men. And men, I know of cases where men will retaliate and physically abuse women. So it's difficult to quantify. Normally, though, there's less of that for the simple reason that men generally are stronger than women. They're of a different constitution to women in terms of physiology, hormones, and things like that. But it does happen. I don't know how often it is, but as I said to you, one of the hidden things about this abuse is emotional abuse, mm-hmm. where constantly putting people down and destroying their self-esteem can lead to retaliatory action itself.
Now, how can men be allies in the fight against gender-based violence, and what role do they play in changing societal norms and attitudes?
Oh, look, I think this is a fairly straightforward thing. You know, we have the situation because of a complete breakdown in South Africa of family life. Some worse in some communities than others. Often faith-based communities have stronger family systems. At the same time, though, it doesn't say that the violence doesn't happen within those family systems. But what we're seeing a lot of now is children growing up without any proper family structure. And when I talk about a family structure, I'm talking about having role models. You know, families take lots of forms, you know, in terms of gender, in terms of whether they're nuclear families, whether they're extended families. The problem is it starts there. It starts with the way children grow up. The role models that children have. If they have a role model, for example, supposing they've got an abusive father, they will grow up believing this is quite a normal thing. Their mother tolerates it. And women tolerate it for a lot of reasons, including the fact that they don't want to break the family up, they're financially dependent. So it can get across to children that children, especially preschool children, it's a crucial age for children to identify as men or as women and how you behave. It's a crucial age for conscience formation about what is right and wrong. And the problem we have is that family life has disintegrated. There's far too many, and I mean, I'm not sure why this is happening, because I know they say child support grants have nothing to do with it, but there are too many women having children without accepting the responsibility of looking after them. We find that grannies are left to do it, or even great-grannies sometimes. There's no man around because the husband doesn't support. If the woman tries to get support from the husband, or most of the cases, there isn't a marriage relationship that I'm talking about. Now, often men, even in marriage, will not maintain those children. We have to address, and I've been saying this, 3 years ago, I gave a paper at an international conference called Heal the Family, and You Will Heal the Nation, and nothing has been done. Nothing. And that's where it starts. These kids are growing up. They go to school, they bully people because that's what they see at home. And they accept that they're going to get beaten up, their mother's going to get beaten up. They do it. It's known. Research has shown this, that when kids grow up like this, they perpetuate that same violence when they grow up themselves. We have to break. That's where we break the cycle, and no one is addressing it. I'm horrified by the lack of sufficient support for families, especially for women who are struggling with children without much, family. When I say family, whether it's an aunt or a uncle, children need the male role models.
Absolutely.
And I have said repeatedly, and the problem is they don't even get them at school a lot of the time, because look at how much abuse, and that's the worst of all. Kids go to school and they're abused by teachers. So, I have put forward solutions before. Put a trained volunteer or counselor at every school to run life skills, and there's a whole life skills program that was developed 50 years ago by FAMSA in Durban. We used to teach it in schools with groups of people, groups of kids. Now, you have someone properly trained, properly vetted, a social worker, a counselor at a school. That's one intervention that could be made, but our department is not doing it, a Department of Education. Life skills which go beyond sex education. You can't do sex education without educating people about the meaning of love and care and friendship, and communication, conflict handling. That's what we used to do in schools. That would complement families. It would pick up the problems and have them addressed by professional people. But I've also appealed over and over again to faith-based communities who are in all communities to provide, whether they're Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, or, there's a variety of faith-based communities, to provide for those pastors or ministers of whatever denomination to provide proper role models for kids, for boys. This is how men should behave. I mean, there's just not enough of that going on. It starts with the male role models and their own relationship with women.
Professor, just to round up, what are some long-term strategies to eradicate gender-based violence and create a safer and more equitable society?
Well, this is part of the longer... I've argued for immediate intervention, to pick up the problems, to address the problems, to support the victims. And the victims aren't getting enough support because often the police, some victims don't report it because they know the police are sympathetic to their husbands. The police themselves abuse people. It's a problem. These are immediate interventions that I'm talking about, but the long-term intervention goes back to starting when children are very young with programs for families, building families, supporting women and trying to get them to make rational decisions about whether they have children or not. Can they support the children? Far too many children are growing up impoverished. They're stunted physically and emotionally. Women have to be talked through this. Women need this type of, they need to make decisions. And, I've always felt quite strongly about this. Women must, especially in this age of reliable contraception, women must be empowered to take decisions about, do I want to have a child? Am I going to be able to support that child? I believe that all women nowadays, especially, unless, and again, there can be a lot of subtle pressure. They want to show men that they're fertile and can bear children for them. That's a big pressure. It's a long problem. But they must think about the welfare of the child that they're going to give birth to. Because it's always the mother that's not always, because sometimes fathers become primary caregivers. But usually it's the mother who's going to be the primary caregiver. She needs to think through the consequences. Can she support that child? Has she got a network of people, like a mother, a grandmother? Is the partner who's going to father the child supportive? Is he going to maintain the child? Of course, a lot of men can't do it because they're unemployed. And some women get abuse because they want to get maintenance from the father of the child. I think a long-term solution, and it goes back to what I told you about, and the fact is that you do life skills education with kids in schools. And you alert them to these things. You can teach all sorts of things in life skills, in groups in life skills, because you have discussions, you get feedback, you teach them about money, about budgeting, you give them tools to build their own self-esteem. I think this should have been, I don't know why our education department, that's one thing, I think the education, I say this to people because, look, and social development, I'm afraid, from what I've seen recently, is nowhere near doing its job properly. I've had some really bad experience with social development and social workers. I'm not sure how well they're trained even nowadays. So, they're the people that are supposed to be there supporting people who can't afford, with medical aid, to go to private therapists, for example. So this is where we should have intervened. I often say this, that violence is our main problem, obviously, in South Africa, but the long-term problem I cannot forgive this government for is education. It has wasted a generation not giving kids. We spend more on education than almost any other African country. But there's no libraries in schools, and there should definitely be properly trained counselors, even if they're not full-time at a school. Perhaps they've got schools in a particular, area. But that is an immediate but also a long-term thing, because that way you could do proper life skills in schools to supplement, pick up the problems in the family and move in with a social worker, properly trained, properly supervised social worker, to actually support that family. Make interventions with young children when you can see things are going wrong. They're not getting supported. Mother's down at the local shebeen. The daughter of a very good friend of mine is a surgeon. I remember he said years ago, she said, this was at Umlazi, and she said, these children come in, they've been run over in the street. I can fix their bodies, but I can't fix the system that allows kids to run around, young kids, unsupervised, so that they're getting run over in the streets. And that's the system we need to fix. It starts with a family.
Professor Dihas, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I want to thank you for joining me in the program this morning, and we'll talk to you again. It's a very, very interesting topic and lots of information that you can share with us, which we thank you for. And enjoy the rest of your day, and all the best to you.
And to you all too, and thank you for inviting me and for your concern about this really important topic. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. We spoke to Professor Mary Dihas, a retired academic and prominent violence researcher, and she spoke to us about the gender-based violence, which is so prevalent. Allahumma salli ala